On that?
I have a question. When you showed the earlier map there, you showed quite a bias for the wolves going up above the promise you made to the legislature. And so there's definitely a conflict between elk and wolves. It's like a balancing scale. If you have too many wolves, you have less elk. And so I'm wondering about, this looks like a good plan, but it's going to take time to do it. I'm looking at next year or maybe the next 2 or 3 years, what's going to happen to the elk? Now, I'm a hunter. I love elk. And so I would rather see more elk on that scale than wolves. But
Well, if wolves are not delisted, then all bets are off as to what.
I'm wondering how you're going to do that.
Monitor the balance between the wolves and ungulates. Well, for one thing, what we're looking at is are the populations, elk populations meeting objectives? Okay. If they're meeting objective, that means the populations are biologically okay in our mind. If they're not meeting objective, then you go to the next level and say, why aren't they meeting objective? If wolf populations are heavy in there and wolf predation is a factor, then we can address that. If populations are in real trouble over here, and we have to go at it more than just hunting season on wolves, so we have to be very, very aggressive.
I think it's a good plan long term, but I'm looking at the next year or 2, 3.
Well,
And you're showing a real bias for the wolves with one of those that you showed us there, way above.
well, the way above the green part, the hunting, the flexibility, the population doesn't have to be up there. The population just can't drop below minimum. And so what we're looking at doing now, the stakeholder groups, and I think most of you would probably agree that, one of the things we found in our survey, the public survey, was, most hunters, if you're a hunter, most hunters, like 80% of them, did not or do not currently support wolf recovery in the state. But if wolves populations are managed in concert and prey, all of a sudden, rather than 80% opposing, 50 to 60% support wolves in the state. Now, there's still a lot of people that don't, but if wolves are being managed, then they can put up with it. And if populations are being managed, then we can do it. And I think all it takes is just time before you realize that, you're gonna have to learn to, they're here. So how best to live with them.
One of the maps he showed as far as population area, I know that there have been groups wiped out, literally, but we've gone in, you guys have gone in, taken out a pack because they were a problem. Why is that not represented on there? Because I know part of that group was down into Hammond, and that part of this map was not shown. Why are we not showing the full boundaries that these have gotten out into?
Okay. Question is, boundaries. The map that we had was based on 2006 data, not 2007 data. In other words, it's a year-old map. We haven't put this year's map on the ground. And the other thing is that our radio-collared wolves, we have 1 or 2 radio-collared animals, and we only fly most of the time about once a month to get a location. And during hunting season and during denning, we will fly, and this time of year we will fly twice a month. That's still only 20 or so locations a year. So these are estimates in packed territories. They're not necessarily the entire thing.
In response to his question, you said if wolves are properly managed, 80% of the hunters will support their population.
No, 50 to 60.
Okay, where in the world does that exist? Where in the world do we have wolves? Does that support exist?
Right on.
I've hunted a lot of wolf country. I've never met anybody who supported it.
I don't know. All that is responding to what the public is saying. I don't, I'm just telling you what the survey says.
Yes, throughout your plan and your charts and graphs, there's a lot of talk about conflicts. But when I look at this plan, I see nothing that encourages responsible management of livestock on public lands. What it does is encourage irresponsible management by, as soon as there's a conflict, wolves can be killed under this scenario. Could you explain what in your plan encourages responsible livestock grazing on public lands?
It's a fair question, but we don't necessarily address public livestock grazing on any of our big game plans. We recognize it as a concern for habitat considerations and those sorts of things, but we don't force the livestock industry. We work with the livestock industry on some of these things. So the process that's currently ongoing will continue. We're planning our process following delisting to not change much. We're still recommending people manage livestock as good as they can, and we work with them for them to avoid conflicts as often as we can. And we provide them options and opportunities. The U.S. Forest Service contacted this office here and asked us to work with them on some of these livestock conflicts to preempt some of these potential problems. So that's an ongoing thing we do with all of our species, and it will be no different with wolves.
But there's no requirement that they manage responsibly.
We don't manage livestock producers. That's private land, and that's federal land. It's not state.
You mentioned that if delisting goes through, who's submitting the delisting request or the backup for that? Are you guys doing that?
Who's submitting the delisting request?
Yeah, the request to remove the wolves.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed to delist wolves.
Okay, they're proposing to delist wolves. Now, are you guys part of that effort?
Absolutely.
With the management plan?
Absolutely. The state is 100% behind delisting.
Okay,
and we have pushed and struggled and coerced and moved on as fast as the legislature, the governor, the Fish and Game Department, and all three states have done everything we can to move this forward.
Was the state initially involved, and were you behind the actual introduction of this community?
As I said, the legislature removed us in 1987.
Okay, so the position of the government was, or at least Idaho Fish and Game at that point in time, was we don't want wolves. Is that correct?
The U.S. Fish and the Endangered Species Act is a very powerful piece of legislation. Okay. There's two ways to go about it. You can stand in front of the train, or you can steer the train. And the way that worked out is that they brought the train in with or without our involvement. So what we decided to do is to help steer the train, and that's why the state became re-involved into wolf management later on.
Okay, now you said south of highway, you said south of highway or Interstate 90, this is an experiment. It's an experimental species, is that correct?
10J, yes. Experimental
Okay,
non-essential population. Yes.
So why are we managing this thing as if it was, these were endangered south of 90?
The Endangered Species Act was amended in 1983. And the amendment from the U.S. Congress was to allow this new rule, this 10J rule, that allows flexibility in reintroduction or recovery of very controversial species. And what that does, this experimental non-essential population, what this actually does is allows the agency, the Fish and Wildlife Service, along with the states, to write the rules, even though they're still listed species. They're actually, rather than endangered, they're listed as threatened. Rather than all of the baggage that comes with that, we're able to write the rules. And that's why today, under the 10J rule, allows a rancher to shoot a wolf that's harassing his livestock. That's a 10J rule. North of I-90, they can't do that because they're listed endangered up there. So that's the difference between those two populations.
Once they're delisted, though, the state of Idaho will all be in the same DPS.
Correct. And so will Montana and Wyoming and part of Washington. Yeah. The question is, once they're delisted, the entire state will be delisted, not just the 10J, not just the whole state.